Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is The Current Podcast.
More than 3,000 people filled a conference hall in Calgary last month. They were attending an Alberta independence rally, one of many events held by separatists in that province as they tried to gather the signatures needed to force a referendum. But new polling data from Angus Reid shows the number of Albertans committed to leaving Canada remains low. Here's what some people in Calgary had to say.
It doesn't make sense for Alberta to leave Canada. I think most people can sense the security that comes with being part of Canada. We have a pension plan that works for us. We have support from the provincial government. We're all meant to work together. And if Alberta feels that they're contributing too much, we need to think about all of the things that we get back in return from being part of this great country.
I don't know. Everything's just gone to heck. So I don't know. I'd rather it to be Canada, but obviously Alberta gets screwed all the time. So I don't know.
Alberta needs to stay in Canada, there's no question about it. We are one great country. I think it's just they're living on a different planet. Thinking that we would have a chance to separate, it's no way.
Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Angus Reid released this new polling data yesterday. It was an online survey that ran from February 2nd to February 6th among a randomized sample of 979 Canadian adults who live in Alberta. Shachi's in Vancouver this morning. Shachi, good morning. Okay, so let's start with support for Alberta independence. How many Albertans did say they were ready to vote to actually separate?
It's really fascinating because you look at both the scope and the intensity of these groups. It is 8% in Alberta who say, show me that ballot. I've packed my bags metaphorically and ready to leave the country, so to speak, in terms of separation. There's another 21% who say they are leaning towards voting to leave in the event of a referendum. By contrast, it's a full 57% of Albertans who say they would definitely vote to stay. So that's 8 times as many who say, yes, they're ready to go.
We just heard from some of the people in Calgary who want Alberta to remain a part of Canada, part of that group you're talking about. What did you find in terms of the number of people that were wanting to remain?
Those who want to remain are really motivated in terms of, what convinces them, what is a compelling argument to stay, by just the notion that, Alberta is a part of Canada. They see themselves as Canadians. And for them, those are it's an emotional reason. It is a reason of patriotism. And for those reasons, they feel like, not only is Alberta better in the country, it is part of the country. The country is not divisible. But
the argument on the leave side is that Alberta is better off without Canada. What is the counter argument to that, specifically that Alberta is stronger within a united Canada?
So for Albertans who want to leave, and indeed for Albertans who want to stay, the sense of grievance it's been around for a long time, Peter, and it's palpable. So that sense that Albertans and Alberta itself do not get as much as they give by being part of Confederation is a sentiment that I've tracked over the better part of 12 years, and it continues to exist as a sentiment. Indeed, 1 in 3 people who want to stay in the country feel that way. So when you combine that long existing entrenched sense of unhappiness, alienation, grievance, call it what you will, with other arguments around control over natural resource policy, a desire to control things like immigration, those are things that leavers would like to have control over, and they see through their lens that being outside of the country will give them that control, will give them that autonomy.
Of that group, the what is it, 1 in 5 who say they're leaning towards separation but kind of weren't sure yet. What did you glean from the data about them?
They are among the most who are convinced by the idea that they want that sense of control. They want to not be, and I'm paraphrasing here, beholden to federal policies that they think hurts the Alberta economy. They want to be able to control their own resources. And they feel, additionally, that they think that Alberta and Albertans have a unique identity that is distinct from the rest of the country. This is profoundly the opposite of what people who are most motivated by staying think and feel.
We probably shouldn't be surprised by the breakdown in party affiliation, but it does seem stark to me that those who vote either NDP or Liberal were largely opposed to separation. Tell us what you found was the case for United Conservative Party, or UCP voters.
UCP voters are across the spectrum on this issue. What's really notable is that UCP voters are among there's a significant segment who are among the most likely to stay. We want to stay. 26% of UCP voters say, hey, not only do I want to stay in the province or in the country, I really want to stay in the country. But you've also got a plurality of UCP voters who say that they would not only lean towards leaving, but then a significant chunk who say they're gone, 16% who say they're gone. So if you're Danielle Smith, if you are the Premier of Alberta, you are presiding over a party base that not only definitely wants to stay, but is leaning towards staying, is leaning towards going, and definitely wants to go. Good luck walking that tightrope.
Well, and the person who's got to walk that tightrope most immediately is Premier Danielle Smith. I suppose to a certain extent, on the flip side of the same coin, Alberta's NDP leader Naheed Nenshi has to as well. What did we learn about how voters feel about the political leaders and their ability to navigate this movement?
Well, so not surprisingly, perhaps, and I'm always sensitive to the word surprise because for some people it's as plain as the nose on their faces. But not surprisingly, Danielle Smith in Alberta is not seen to be a particularly convincing or approved of leader in terms of the way she's handling this particular issue or file. Her approval on that particular measure is at a minus 17, so a net negative 17. And again, the reason for that tracks exactly back to the impossibility of trying to keep all aspects of her base on side when her base is home to really, really conflicting and disparate opinions on this.
Shachi, thanks for this. As always, great to have you.
Thanks, Peter.
Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. I'm joined now by two Albertans who have been listening in and watching this story closely. Ian Brodie is a political scientist at the University of Calgary. He was chief of staff to Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Keith McLaughlin is a political strategist and was a chief of staff in former Premier Rachel Notley's NDP government. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning. Keith, if I can, I'll start with you. What do you think these poll results tell us about the state of play for Alberta separatism?
I actually think it's telling us that there's a significant room to be concerned. The headline numbers suggest, a majority of Albertans remain solidly against separation. But the Angus Reid produced an extremely captivating data set. And when you dig into some of the crosstabs and the numbers around where support for separation may go based on the things that motivate Albertans, which is primarily the economy and a bunch of other grievances that potentially could come up in the next 6-7 months, there is a lot of room for this sentiment to grow and to be an outlet for more things. And so when I look at some of the underlying numbers, I think I'd have more concern.
Ian, this is just one poll of many in recent months. Do you see something to be concerned about? Do you see something the separatists can build upon? Do you see a ceiling in these? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I have to agree with Keith here, Peter. I think this poll, combined with the other polls we've seen since the beginning of the year, show that the separatist side in Alberta is well within its ability to move the yes for separation number up into the 30 to 35% level. That's right now. If we look back at 1995 in Quebec, that's not that much different from the yes side for independence in Quebec at the beginning of 1995. And by the time the vote came around, we knew it was much closer. very close to getting that majority. But the precedent I go back to is in 1980 in Quebec, where the Federalists won what was by any measure kind of a 20-point victory at that point. That didn't put the issue away. No. If we get to the vote in October or November and the separatist side is up in the 35-40% range, I don't think that puts this issue away. I think we're into this for quite a while.
And it feels like, and you guys are obviously closer to the ground than this, but it feels like we're entering into that phase where we really sharpen the arguments. The Leave side seems to have a pretty clear case. Keith, do you feel like the Federalist side, the Stay side, is articulating its argument as well and as clearly as it needs to at this point?
No, I don't. I think that the Federalist side is going to manifest in a number of different ways. It's not fully being articulated by Premier Smith, obviously, given her party is split on the separation issue, so she doesn't have a lot of political room to move there. I think on sort of the progressive side, so the Alberta NDP and the lumpen progressive atmosphere in Alberta, so labor unions, etc., haven't had a real strong message on this. There's a lot of economic grievance and other items that are really motivating the vote generally for some of the folks who are susceptible to go to the separatist side. And I don't believe that's being sort of attacked well by the progressive left. And then I'd say the business community in Alberta hasn't spoken up yet. And all of these folks, I think, need to start kind of speaking up a bit louder about primarily how much of an economic impact this will have on Albertans and on their households, which is when you dig into this data set, that's where you see the most sort of that's the most motivating factor for either staying or leaving. If you look into a number of these questions.
Ian, you talked about the Quebec history that I think a lot of Canadians are familiar with, but walk us through where we stand sort of in a historical comparison to the separatist movement swell in Alberta. Is this a new peak?
No, I think this is just beginning, Peter. Look, the Alberta separatist movement comes out of a 10-year period where the federal government did everything it could to thwart Alberta from growing as quickly as it could and achieving its economic destiny. The difference between here and 95 is that in 95, Bill Clinton, who was the U.S. president at the time, weighed in twice on the no side of the referendum campaign. As we look ahead here to the fall and a potential referendum vote in the fall, obviously all of the pressure is going to be the other way. The federal government offer is, if Alberta gets a pipeline proposal, gets Indigenous groups and BC on side and builds a carbon capture and storage project, we'll let you achieve your economic destiny if we get a 2-year permitting period and then several years of litigation after that. I would expect in the fall there's a good possibility that the Americans will come and say, we'll recognize an independent Alberta. We'll have 60-day pipeline approvals and we'll get those pipelines built in a year. At that point, I think then the dynamics of this as the economic security piece that Keith just talked about might shift in the other direction. And I don't get the sense the federal government is doing much to get ahead of that side of the referendum campaign.
Within the existing sort of party or partisan breakdown, Keith, the United Conservative Party paints a really interesting picture. 41% lean toward leaving. Shachi was just saying 26% within the party really want to stay. 16% say they would definitely vote to leave. What does that mean for Premier Danielle Smith? And is she going to have to sort of make a stand amongst her party one way or the other at some point?
At some point eventually. I think her line right now of believe in a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada isn't going to stand both for the separatists in her party and for the federalists in the party and everyone outside that party who has a view on this. I think at this point, Premier Smith is walking a very, very tightrope, but it's about to get very windy up there. And this is going to be quite the trapeze act that she's going to be on. But sooner or later, it's going to have to, come down to a much better set of language and key messages. I think right now the premier is looking for enough space to move into, and she's hoping that this deal with the federal government on the pipeline And these conversations with Premier Eby and with Mark Carney's around the table as well actually bear enough fruit that she can become more of a full-throated defender of federalism in Canada. But at the moment, she doesn't have the space to do that because half her party wants to leave or intends to vote yes in a referendum. And she could split her party and risk her government if she's not careful.
Ian, I started my career reporting on politics in Quebec City. I covered Lucien Bouchard. I know that story well of how he stepped in to drive the referendum in 95 and really brought it very close to the brink. And I hear a lot of people talking about that could happen in Alberta, where a charismatic leader could step in and grow the sovereigntist movement. Is there also a case to be made that somebody could step in and become Captain Canada and make that case for a united Canada and a strong Alberta within that united Canada as well?
Well, I think there's only one choice here, and the Prime Minister has to be the spokesman for that side of the referendum campaign. As they say, his campaign here is built around this memorandum of understanding on future of pipeline construction. He's put his offer on the table. I think we're now waiting for offers from others around the table. And in fact, I hope the federal government is thinking through what other changes they might make in order to accelerate the timeline for Alberta achieving its economic potential here. That's the main issue. Can Alberta do that within Confederation, or does Alberta have to find some other arrangement in order to do that? If the Memorandum of Understanding, this MOU, is the federal offer here, I think there's room for others to come back with a much better offer.
I want to play a clip here from former federal Liberal Party leader Stéphane Dion, who was the author of the Clarity Act. He weighed in over the weekend. Let's just take a listen, and I'll get both of your reactions.
I have no patience for separatist blackmail. And when the Premier is involved in separatist blackmail, you should say to the Premier, I will come with a deal with you if it makes sense for Alberta and Canada, but not in order to mollify the separatists of your party. Put your country before your party, please. In my province, Quebec, I've seen that so much. People with full of skills and talents, instead of working to improve the situation of Quebec and Canada, they are trying to split the country and they are wasting their energy in it. That's very sad for Quebec. I don't think Alberta should emulate that.
Ian, separatist blackmail. How does that sit with you? How do you think it'll sit with Albertans?
Well, this is why I think the federal government has to get a team to handle this referendum and a strategy to handle this referendum, and to stop relying on people like Stéphane Dion to make the case against separation. He chaired the Trudeau government's cabinet committee on climate change. He's as much responsible for the 10 years of holding back Alberta's potential as anybody else in that government. He's almost the worst person you could put out on this case here. And I hope that at some point shortly, the federal government gets this situation under control and stops putting out, frankly, weak spokesmen for the no campaign like Stéphane Dion.
Keith, what risks do you think come with this sort of positioning?
That sort of line of attack from someone like Stéphane Dion is extremely unhelpful. So I agree wholeheartedly with Ian. Part of the reason why there's a lot of Albertans signing on to this, they're signing on to, quote unquote, send a message to Ottawa. They're not fully really full-throated separatists. Conversations like this get Albertans' backs up, and so it's not helpful. And we really need to focus on sort of, again, what's going to be best for Albertans and their again household finances, to really get those people pulled back from the brink of being like, oh yeah, I want to send a message to Ottawa by wrecking our economy. That's just not the way to win this debate, by talking about blackmail, etc.
Ian, I have less than a minute left, but just last word to you. It's impossible to know in a moment as sweeping as this where you are in the narrative, but where do you think, are we in the middle? Are we approaching sort of the end game of this? Where are we in this conversation nationally?
I think the separatists in Alberta have a concept of this campaign in their mind. They're in sort of act one of it to try to get enough signatures to get their question on the ballot, probably sometime this fall. The rest of the team, the federal government team, the no side, is still trying to get their act together. I don't think we'll see much of a no campaign until, frankly, as we get into the summer. I know there's some interest around Calgary who are trying to put together statements. The problem is that the separatists are thinking this through and have thought through what the next steps are, and the no side has not.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but really appreciate you both. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Ian Brody is a political scientist at the University of Calgary, was chief of staff to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Keith McLaughlin is a political strategist and a former chief of staff in Rachel Notley's NDP government in Alberta.
You've been listening to The Current podcast. My name is Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.